Good to have all of you here. It's always exciting to me to be able to talk about manufacturing. First of all, I want to thank Chortek as one of our sponsors of this report. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. We know that this is the best source of Wisconsin manufacturing information we don't have a bias, we don't have an axe to grind, we aren't trying to do anything other than get a good, clear picture of what's happening in Wisconsin manufacturing. So we get a really good look with this through 405 20-minute interviews with manufacturers across the state. We follow that up with 4 focus groups. So we think we have a really good set of quantitative data and then followed up with the qualitative discussions to really explain what the findings are. What we see with 5 things here we're going to go through today. 1, really confident group. Number 2, the labor market is softening, but it's going to be a problem for a long time. If you don't have labor, you start automating. And number 4 is with the improvement in productivity and increased capacity, a little softening of markets, manufacturers are looking to go into new markets again. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about attitudes around tariffs. What we found here was Wisconsin manufacturers are incredibly optimistic. You could see that this is the highest rating we've had in the 5 years that we've done this survey. We use a political pollster, so take the positive, subtract the negative. We actually have a plus 40 in terms of going the right direction in the economy in general. They're also believing that the economy is growing, which was a unique finding for us. And then when you start talking about positive terms, this is the most positive that manufacturers have been about the economy since we've been doing this survey, since the first year of the survey anyway. So a real positive picture about the economy. This number blew me away because this is one of the most stable numbers, not only in Wisconsin, but across the country. That is always sitting in the mid 80s, and this thing popped to 90 this year. It surprised me so much. I called the pollster. I said, Rob, you have something wrong here. And we went back and looked at the data. No, manufacturers are really confident in their operations as well. And most of that improvement came from smaller manufacturers. So you can see a jump of 6 points there in terms of what the smaller manufacturers are talking about with their individual operations. And then when you ask manufacturers about where they see their businesses going, they see revenues going up, they see profitability going up, and now you see the first indication of uncertainty because capital expenditures are flat. So we see behind that is that all of the uncertainty is causing manufacturers to take half a step back, pause, and say, do I really want to make this long-term decision before I understand what the rules of the road are? Manufacturers may not be investing in capital expenditures, but they are spending in other areas. You can see these categories. Number 1 right now is growing revenue and profitability. You can see where the biggest jumps are. We will get back to most of these, but you can see the huge jump in automation, and you'll see those in the numbers as we go forward. So less help wanted. So once again, when we ranked 25 different topics, workforce ended up on the top of the list again. You can see that finding and attracting employees and keeping them are the 2 top items there. We don't think that's going to change for the foreseeable future. The demographics are just deadly. I mean, we will not have a growing workforce for the foreseeable future. And until we do, that will remain 1 and 2 in the survey. You can see the big changes here. You could see overall, manufacturers were a little more chill this year. They were less concerned about everything. Almost there were only 2 or 3 categories that went up. But you can see here where the concerns dropped the most. One of the interesting parts was when we talked about inflation. You'll see this come in again later. Last year, the concern was all about wage inflation, the cost of employees and how much more it was going to cost to employ people in the coming year. Inflation is still important, but that's really flipped now towards the cost of other inputs. That's where the inflation concern is coming from in that whole area. We asked an open question on what are the one or two things that are most affecting your business, and we keep talking about people, keep talking about inflation there, but now we have a new entrant right at number 2, which is all around tariffs. What surprised us about this, and we'll get into a little bit more later, was the concern about tariffs was more about price than it was supply. So more about price than it was supply. Manufacturers felt pretty comfortable that they were going to have the supply. They just didn't know how much it was going to cost. And you can see that the concern there with employees is much higher among larger companies than smaller companies. We can see a weakening or a softening in the labor market when we look at these numbers overall. Fewer companies are saying that it's very difficult to find employees. This number has dropped steadily over the 5 years that we've been looking at this. It's down 44 points from where it was in the original survey for large companies. It's also down for the smaller companies. And then when we look at the number of companies hiring, it's staying relatively flat, but the companies that are hiring for fewer positions. So the demand is slackening as well. So these are the things that manufacturers are saying that they're doing to retain and attract new employees. You can see the list. The things that jumped the most were, we'll talk about AI later, but up 10 points, you can see that there. And then also when you start talking about technology. What we see overall in the qualitative data is when we came out with this 5 years ago and did our first focus group, manufacturers in the focus group were very rigid. You know, I expect my employees to be here at 5 minutes to 7. The shift starts at 7, and damn it, they better work all day. Take your breaks, fine, but be at your position, meet your quota. Don't leave a second early, and be damn glad you got a job. Now it's, Bill, you need to pick up your kids from school? You need to move your shift an hour? Let's figure out how we can make that happen. Oh, you have a doctor's appointment this afternoon? Let's see if we can work that out rather than losing the whole shift. A lot more flexibility, a lot more willingness to work with employees, and a lot more give and take about how you approach employees, how you approach your workers, and how you get them engaged. If you don't have workers, you start automating, right? So what we see here is that the importance of automation is growing as we go through this survey. More and more manufacturers are saying that this is going to be really key to staying competitive and getting the most out of the employees that I do have. If you look here, obviously larger manufacturers think it's more important than small or medium-sized manufacturers, but both of those numbers are increasing. The biggest obstacle to implementing this is financing, not unexpected. You know, and what we find in our work is that it's that first investment in automation. You know, getting that manufacturer to make that first big investment is a real issue. But once they do the right thing in the right place at the right time and see that ROI, they just start doubling down. And you can see that in the lower right-hand corner where 41% of the manufacturers say, we have no problem at all in implementing new technology. AI, we've asked 3 questions about AI. This is one of the ones that shows just a huge jump in how AI is being used. You know, a third of manufacturers now are actively using AI, and that bottom line is now in the minority. 3 years ago, you know, 72% of manufacturers said, look, this has nothing to do with me, keep it away from me, it's just confusing, I don't like it. Now at least people are starting to get in the pool. Where we're seeing this change is now when we ask manufacturers about how important do you think AI is going to be, there's a very small number that think this is going to be transformational. Most manufacturers are moving from that bottom group where it's not going to have any impact to where it's one technology out of many. This looks really right to me because what we see in the market is a real bifurcation among manufacturers. There are very small number of manufacturers, probably that 8% there, that have any business at all using this on their production floor right now. They're just not ready. Either they don't have their processes under control or they don't understand the technology well enough to really make use of it. So those 8% understand how that's going to transform their world. Most of the manufacturers that we see are in one of two camps. Either they're going, I know this is important, I should be doing something. How do I get started? Right? How do I take that first step? And then once they take that first step, it's how do I get an ROI from it? And it's really interesting to me how this has changed over 3 years. We've combined these questions into what we call the AI embracement curve. This is what it looked like in 2023. The ones on the left of the screen are the folks that are saying, this isn't for me. The ones on the right are saying, yep, I'm in. And you can see how that tilted 2 years ago. We saw it flatten out a bit last year. And the hockey stick has really happened in this past year. I think what's really interesting for me is there are manufacturers all over. Guys in this room, you know when you have a new technology or a new approach, the first problem you go attack is not the one that's been in the plant for 30 years and involves 47 different people. You go get a quick win, right? But what we're seeing with people with AI who are moving this onto the floor is they're going after that big problem. You would never, ever, ever do that. So the key is with AI, using it just the way that you would in any kind of change management situation, which is get some quick wins, show some return with the technology, and then build from there. And we're starting to see that more and more as we go forward. And people start understanding that the technology can really meld in with everything else that they're doing. Sales increase. So we've seen manufacturers get more capacity. We all remember the pandemic, right? We were so damn busy just trying to serve our customers that we had no interest in a new customer. No interest at all. Well, now improvements in productivity, a little slackening of the market. Now we're seeing manufacturers go back into finding new customers and growing their business. One interesting change is that they're staying home. This is a number that jumped, that 87% is up from 80 in the previous surveys. Manufacturers are saying, I'm going to grow, but I'm going to do it close to home. It's less risk. Why would I mess around with all of the trading intricacies right now and the changing rules? I'm just going to stay home and grow my business here. This is some of the places where we're investing money. Again, you can see employees, number 2, got to make sure that you have the crew to be able to supply those new customers. But really going out and finding those new markets is a new emphasis that we've seen in this survey. And then this was a big surprise last year to me. Just the percentage of manufacturers that say word of mouth is key. That really surprised me. And it's caused us to change the way that we do business now. It's a lot more one-on-one and a lot more personal contact. I was really skeptical of this until I heard the woman who is in charge of experiential marketing for Leinenkugel talk about experiential marketing and how they do that at the brewery. Put experiential marketing in instead of word of mouth. Those numbers fall out exactly the way that she had them. So this is also more important among smaller companies than larger companies. You see a more traditional break when you get to the larger companies, but still, word of mouth plays an important role in finding new customers. Finally, let's talk about tariffs. Here's what manufacturers are saying about tariffs. They're really concerned about cost increases. They're really concerned about the uncertainty and their inability to plan. Just the changing rules is causing a mess. I think we're up in almost 600 changes in tariff policy since this all began earlier this year. So those changes are making for a lot of uncertainty. One of the things that surprised me was that there was less uncertainty about supply. And in having our conversations, I think one of the things that's really shown through is, during the pandemic, we really built some new supply chain muscles, right? We learned how to make our supply chains more resilient. We learned how to find multiple sources of supply and make sure that we could stay in business. Those muscles now are coming back into use, right? We can deal with that uncertainty of supply much better than we could 6 or 7 years ago. Tariffs are impacting larger companies much more than smaller companies. You can see 47% of the companies under $1 million say it has no impact on me. So, much more impact for larger companies than smaller companies. And then the thing that we found most interesting that we were able to put some data on, we've heard anecdotally all year that there was a split in opinions on tariffs, whether you're for them or you're against them, right? If you're against them, you know why you're against them. It's all the traditional reasons, right? But if you're for them, it was interesting that manufacturers split out into 3 camps. The first camp is, it's helping my business. So I was listening to a CEO of a chemical company a couple months ago talk about tariffs, and he said, look, he said, all of my supplies are domestic. All of my customers are looking for a domestic supplier. Business is great. I can't keep up. Bring on more tariffs. We love it. And there are manufacturers like that all through the state. So that's one group. There's a second group in there that's saying, tariffs are hurting my business. They're making it tougher for me to do work. But they're saying, as long as China's getting theirs and they're feeling a little pain, I'm willing to take a little pain too. So a little bit of retribution in that whole thing. So there's a whole China factor in what we heard from these manufacturers. And then there's the third group, the group that I'm calling the true believers. They're the folks that are saying, these tariffs are going to bring all manufacturing back to the United States. They say it's hurting my business, but long term, we're going to be back in the driver's seat with manufacturing across the board. We'll see if that happens. I'm a little skeptical. There are sprouts, but those are the 3 groups that we really see splitting out in this data. And it'll be fun to watch as we go forward with this. So what should you take away? Number 1, manufacturers in Wisconsin are an extremely optimistic group. If you look at the national data, we are much more optimistic than either other states in the region or other regions. The Fed just published some new numbers this week, and these numbers are way above what the various regions that the Fed publish are. Manufacturers are split on tariffs. We talked about that. I think that split is there for a longer period of time until we really see impact one way or another. Workforce is just going to be an issue for at least the next decade, and it will be an ongoing concern. The market's softening a little bit, but manufacturers are really going to be leaning into productivity and technology and ways to get more out of workers to make sure that they're being productive in the facility. AI is going to be a key in more manufacturing operations. We're seeing more manufacturers embrace it and really find ways to use it. And then this last one has always been interesting to me. Whenever we've done this survey over the last 5 years, whether it's the big survey or little pulse surveys, we always find this group of manufacturers that's under significant stress. It's somewhere around 20%. They're the ones whose profits aren't growing. They're the ones who are finding it toughest to find new employees. They're the ones who aren't able to invest. The past few years have been pretty good for manufacturing. I get concerned if we see a significant downturn. I think we could lose a significant number of manufacturers if things were to get tough. I don't think we'll lose the manufacturing, but we will lose manufacturers. So if you're a manufacturer, what should you take away? First of all, invest in your workforce, right? You want a talented and engaged workforce. We're seeing a lot more manufacturers invest in culture. We're seeing a lot more manufacturers upskill. They're understanding that the spot market for labor isn't there, so invest in the folks that you have. Willing to put a lot more money to develop the skills needed to invest in new technology. Get a plan to increase your productivity. We saw the demographic cliff coming 8 or 9 years ago. We created the Transformational Productivity Initiative. We were looking to increase the productivity of individual manufacturers by 30% or more. One of the things that we found was one of the critical issues was to make sure that you had that roadmap. So that you had that roadmap that really lined up with your market position, your financial strength, and your tolerance for risk. So that you had a plan that could hold yourself accountable and you understood where your investments were going and what kind of return you were expecting to get. So we think that that plan is as critical as anything that you can do in facing the markets right now. AI is going to have a big impact. Embrace it now. Embrace it now when it's easy to learn, when you don't have to be real technical, when you can come up the curve with everyone else, and you can be one of the leaders in addressing this. Do not start on your production floor unless you have a really high tolerance for pain. Go do it somewhere else. Do it in marketing, do it in accounting, do it in customer service, right? Where you're not threatening the family jewels and you can recover, right? I mean, that makes sense. Then finally, we think that the expertise is important. You know, it's really critical that you get experts involved in an area where you need some really deep talent. But what's more important is that you find guides that can help you engage the expertise when and where you need it. The right experts at the right time in the right place. And the face of manufacturing right now is changing so fast, especially on the technology front, especially in the international trade front, that if you're trying to run a plant and keep track of all this, you're fighting a losing battle. So it's important to find people that you trust in the marketplace who can help you lay out that plan and really be a guide on what's coming next. So that's what I have. We're always happy to talk about manufacturing. All of these slides and a lot more data is available on our website, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you very much.